We've seen one, and me and Dr. that cooks at my store, who's the director.
Okay.
And he was saying,
Welcome to the second night of Business Plan Challenge. I'm excited to see so many faces. I missed last week because I was running away from Sandy and Jennifer, but they made me come back. Anyway, we had a couple of questions, and you know, there's always a little bit of confusion for the contestants when you first start these classes. So there were some questions that several people had, and the committee met Monday to iron those questions out. Excuse me. So the first answer is somebody asked, what is an existing versus new business? If we've been operating but we haven't moved yet. The answer to that question is the minute you get a tax ID number, the clock starts ticking. And so you cannot have had a tax ID number for more than 6 months. That qualifies whether you're existing or starting. So because in-home businesses are recognized, you know, throughout the small business world. So whether you're in a home or whether you're in a storefront really doesn't matter. It has to do with your tax ID number. So the second question was, what is temporary and what is full-time? Because this is $5,000 and we don't generally track this for a whole year because most small businesses, you know, get that whole thing started before then. We cannot spend countless hours and time and energy on taking temporary people and adding and subtracting and multiplying the hours and trying to decide if you used a bunch of temporary people, if you lived up to the same amount of hours that are part-time. So here's what temporary is. You can hire, and I think the guidelines say you can either create one full-time job or 2 temporary jobs. Temporary is considered anywhere from 20 to 30 hours a week, and that's based on guidelines from the Department of Labor. Full-time is considered 35 to 40 hours a week. If you have a partnership, that is not considered job creation. That is business owners. And I think these guys tonight will tell you that in partnerships, you know, you generally have a managing partner, and that's just not job creation. That is business creation. So you still have to create a job. Okay? If we have any other questions, I'll be happy to try to address them based on what we have discussed. If there is some unusual situation that arises, we have an executive committee that's made up of me, Sandy Ratliff, Jennifer, Nita, and Suzanne Lay. And any new situation that arises, the executive committee gets together and makes a decision based on the question, and hopefully not the, you know, not the contestant. So, do you have any questions so far about any of the points of clarification, or were there any other questions that we didn't clarify?
I have on full. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
On full time, do you provide sick leave and vacation? Is that required?
You know, small businesses, and again, the people that are going to speak to you tonight can answer those questions on the legal standards. But most small businesses don't really have to comply with any of the, well, I shouldn't say any. Any business under 50 employees doesn't comply with the Affordable Care Act. You know, there are certain standards that small business really doesn't have to worry about. So save your questions for these guys, because they'll be able to give you a better answer to that.
When you said partnership, were you talking about that in the terms of like a legal entity, or like an LLC like Mike and I are?
Yeah, if either. It's either.
Okay.
Like if you went to work for Adventure Mendo, that's not considered a job.
Okay.
You all are owners of that business, so that's just not considered a job.
Well, the second one then I had was on when you're a seasonal employer, you're only gonna work 6 months out of the year. So I know you don't wanna be counting a lot of different ones, but that would end up being 4 part-time positions to make equal to what you're talking about. Is that correct?
We decided that, what did we decide?
We base a full-time job and 35 hours a week, and that's based on the, state retirement system. It's the best thing that we can come up with.
And that's for you.
Yes. And then if you look at a part-time, anything under that, I mean, that was 1,800 and some, I'm trying to think how many hours, I just figured it up. But if you look at a part-time, we were thinking about anything that's over like 1,035, something like that. I've got the numbers, still have it with me.
Probably 1,040, because 280s are typically 40 hours.
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking.
To the square root.
But keep in mind, go ahead. I was gonna say, keep in mind when we are, distributing those funds, Eva, you know, Nita, the last payment will be based on your employment. And she would have to figure that, all that out. And I don't think we wanna wait until the end of the year, you know, the 12 months when the period is ended that you have to do it, you know.
Right.
Preferably look at in the first 6 months. Typically, probably 6 months is what, how, your folks, are they 6 months or?
Well, we open for 6 months, but, you know, and we have a whole lot of people there, probably 4.5 to 5 months on the beginning and the end of that 6 month spread. You know, the kids are going back to school, we're winding down. If the weather's not suitable, we're not doing anything, so.
Here's the thing, you have to show proof of employment before you can draw out the last $1,500. So we will have the W-9, we want a copy of the W-9s with the Social Security number whited out. We don't want those employees' Social Security number, we just want their name and their signature, you know. However, you know, at $5,000, 2 part-time jobs within that year shouldn't be that difficult to track, you know. So if we have a situation arise, we'll address it if that's the, you know, because that won't have anything to do with your winning. If you start drawing down and you've drawn down $3,500 and we get to that last $1,500, then the team will determine if you have created the jobs that are required. If not, that last $1,500 is just forfeited back to the next challenge.
Keep in mind where our money is coming from. This is public funds, and we have to be very, very, I guess, do our due diligence.
Well, the governmental entities are giving this money not for you to create your own wealth. They're giving this money to create small business in all these communities. So you have to, you know, you have to consider that the county and the town of Highlands Small Business Incubator, and they contribute their services on a regular basis to people who utilize this facility and people who utilize this business challenge, and I appreciate them greatly. Mike Spiegler's a CPA with Spiegler Blevins, and they're across the street from me, and so he gets more of my questions than anybody. April Hamby, I've served with April for many years. She is with Empire Insurance Agency, and April serves many community activities, including the founder of the Justin Foundation. And April's been an avid member and supporter of the Washington County Chamber of Commerce. So we are excited to have them here tonight and ask them your questions after you give them a big round of applause.
I'll just say we weren't timing that entrance for introduction. Talking back there.
So who's going to start off the question, the tough questions? Come on. Don't be shy. I warned you last week to have your questions ready.
Okay. I have a question for Mrs. Crabtree. Okay. My business is in-home assistance business for the elderly and the veterans. We've been looking at insurances, so so that our people are covered if something happens in the home, something is stolen or an accident happens in the home. What is the best insurance, being bonded, or what do I need?
Well, I mean, I don't do a whole lot of different types of insurance. I'm an Allstate insurance agent, and our business area is kind of limited. Allstate does have a very good website, and I printed off the information for you all to have. Even if you're not an Allstate customer, there is a business site on there, a connection site, and I'll give you the information. You can go on there, you can look at how to do business plans, how to do handbooks, tax questions, where to go for advice, articles about business insurance, and there's lots of different things out there because everybody's business is specific, okay, to what they need. If you have people come into your home, or you say people go into other homes when they're helping elderly or veterans, okay? And there are different types. Typically, people have a general liability policy, but different businesses require different types of insurance. So specifically, I would probably just speak to an agent that is more in tune with what you might do specifically, and then ask them what you might need. And sometimes attorneys can help you as well, or even accountants can offer advice as well as to what specifically is needed. Depending on, I'm an Allstate agent, I have what's called a business owner policy in my office, okay? So I insure the things that I have in my office through a BOP, business owner policy, okay? I don't have a goods and services. I don't go out and sell anything other than insurance. People come to my office to buy it. I do have a general liability within that policy to help cover things. I also have what's called errors and omissions insurance. If I do something that's incorrect, and within that errors and omissions insurance, which I don't sell to myself, Allstate requires me to purchase it from a set vendor, there are things in there for employee dishonesty, to ensure your, the staffing and different things for different, that which is kind of what you're talking about a little bit, but not necessarily an errors and omissions policy for you specifically. But within those policies, oftentimes, they're packaged specifically for needs. A florist has a different need than a doctor's office, so oftentimes there's different coverages depending on what type of insurance and what type of business that you run. Does that help at all?
Yes. So
that doesn't specifically answer your question, and I apologize.
no, that's fine. So as the sole proprietor of my business, and I pick up a general liability policy that covers my employees, should I have a separate policy for myself to cover anything, or am I covered under the business?
Well, there's also as an individual, we have what's called a personal umbrella policy.
I'm sorry, what's that?
Personal umbrella policy for $1 million liability. Typically, that doesn't cover business pursuits. There's also things in business policies that provide not only a general liability, which is basically a general liability, but there's other pieces to that you can provide coverage. Within a policy, you might be able to get your general liability, and you might be able to get something for the employees, and it all might be part of one package policy, or you might have to purchase different separate policies. And there's different carriers provide different things. Different insurance offices provide different types of things. So it just depends, what that specific company might offer.
Did you say you're sending employees out to your clients' homes?
I'm sorry, what's that?
You're sending your staff out to clients'
Yes.
homes? You probably have some liability exposure there that you may want to consider an LLC or a corporation.
We are LLC.
Okay.
And, so, we're just done looking at the insurance end of it. But we're gonna be ready to go here probably within a month. So, we got a few more ducks to line up here, so to speak.
And I will tell you from my Allstate perspective, Allstate is very specific, and in here it talks about the different types of businesses that we might insure. So you'll know if it would be applicable or not, but a general office like CSE or another independent agency that represents lots of different companies, oftentimes they have more flexibility and they specialize in business, or Joe Hutton, different people. I'm not putting plugs for different people, I'm just giving you examples of places you might want to contact. But oftentimes, a general insurance agent has more avenues for more specific types of business that sometimes an exclusive agent like a State Farm or Allstate or Nationwide might not be able to write. I'm not saying those other businesses can't, I just know what Allstate can and can't do. Like, I couldn't write your business, okay? I couldn't write your business from Allstate. So,
Can I interject that just question to ask Kyle and Mike both, but in a business where you're providing a service that has a potential for a great liability, would you advise from a legal standpoint or a CPA standpoint to be a sole proprietor, LLC, subchapter S? What would be your advice on that?
You want to talk about the liability aspect?
Sure.
Everybody needs liability insurance in business.
And you mentioned, the lady asked the question, that you're set up as an LLC already, so she's not operating as a sole proprietorship or partnership.
Are you operating as a sole proprietorship?
No, I'm the LLC.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm deaf.
Okay. The benefit, if you're providing a service or whether you're selling goods, selling merchandise, if you have the public coming onto your place of business, there's potential risk, liability exposure, in almost everything you do. And as I like to say, here in the United States, we like to sue each other. And if you're in business long enough, and even if you're not in business, if you have 10 cents to your name, at some point, you will be involved in a legal action of some sort. And if you're running a business, your exposure is much greater. So how do you protect yourself? Well, if you're operating as a sole proprietorship, all of your personal assets, everything you own, is at risk, potential risk, in terms of liability exposure. For a partnership, it's worse. If you're operating as a partnership, what's required to operate as a partnership? All you have to do is just start conducting business with somebody else. You're a partnership. There's no formal requirements to establish a partnership. But there's what's called joint and several liability, so you are 100% liable. Fully, all of your personal assets, their actions may result in, but anything your partner does, you are 100% liable, and all of your personal assets are at risk. So by establishing a corporation, if it's done properly, or by establishing a limited liability company, if it's done properly, you can limit your liability to the extent of your investment. You have to maintain, in accordance with legal requirements, you have to maintain those entities in order to maintain your protection. If you don't follow what's required in terms of annual meetings, maintaining minutes, filings with the State Corporation Commission, then you might as well not set it up at all. But if you do that, then you can protect yourself such that only your investment is exposed, as opposed to all your personal assets. And you're not going to be held, your personal assets are not going to be put at risk based on the actions of the people that you're in business with. And that's not true for a partnership. Is that what you were asking, Dennis?
That's what I was fishing for.
All right.
Do you have to keep the minutes for, the meetings for LLC?
Yes, you're going to need to follow the legal requirements in terms of the structure of the LLC. And so there's similar type requirements as for a corporation, where you file your articles of organization with the State Corporation Commission here in Virginia, Tennessee, it's the Secretary of State's office. And then you're going to need to pretty much conduct yourself as if you are set up as a corporation. The terms are different though. They have different names for the officers, they have different names. You have members, you don't have shareholders, but you still have those requirements that you're going to have to comply with.
Do they notify you when they're due?
No, there's an annual filing where you have to pay a fee on an annual basis. But as far as annual meeting and minutes, so you have to do that on your own.
And each of those entities have different aspects of taxation as far as an LLC versus a corporation are concerned. And those aspects differ according to, the income that's passed through. And each of those entities, generally small businesses like yourselves, will either be an S corporation or an LLC. And both of those entities pass their income and loss through to the owners, and that's basically where the tax gets paid. Depending upon the nature of the business and the operations and the assets and the liabilities, really, will determine which entity might be best for you, and whether or not they're going to give you some negative tax implications. But generally, just from a deduction standpoint, everything that's deductible in one is deductible on the other. There really aren't that what you can deduct as a LLC, as a corporation, much less as a sole proprietor.
And to qualify for S corp status, you establish a corporation under the law of the state where you're located. But it's a filing with the IRS that qualifies you for S corp status. So you can be taxed as a partnership, taxed as corporate.
Okay, I have a question. This is so embarrassing. Y'all are gonna just be shocked. But another challenge, we asked the question, who has workers' comp insurance in here? And there was a large group, and some people have been in business several years, not a soul had it. And so, I'm going into my second year. I didn't have it either. And that's something, we have to do. And, the truth is, we don't really know how to, I don't know how to do it. Do I contact the state of Virginia, or? I feel really stupid asking that, but I wasn't the only one. We just had not done it. We had all of our insurance, but we had never got workers' comp for our employees.
Well, most companies sell workers' compensation. And if not, they broker it typically through another company. Mine personally is through the Hartford. Basically, it's based on your annual salary and how many employees that you might have, and they decide a figure.
Is it expensive?
I have 10 employees, and mine's about $700 a year. It depends on the type of business that you have. If it's a tree cutting business, it might be
Going down the river
a little bit more than sitting at an office. So, any insurance agent, if they don't sell it, they could direct you to someone that could. And,
Okay.
But yes, if you have employees other than yourself, you don't have to include yourself
Right.
into the workman's comp. But, if you get hurt on the job, it would be just your disability or whatever. But if an
Right.
employee gets hurt on the job, technically you could be liable for that.
So if I had, if you want, like, if there was a number like under 10, and you were right at that number, you could disqualify yourself, because,
It's not based on, to my knowledge, they just want to know a number of employees. And really, it's really based on, sometimes they base it on annual revenue, depending on what type of business that you have.
Right.
Or it might be on the salary of the staff. It just depends, on how your business is, what type of business you have, as to
Okay.
what type it can be.
good to know.
Is it just more than two employees?
I do
More
not
than
know
three?
that.
No, it's not more than, it's 3.
So it's more than two.
But there's a new knowledge on YouTube, company policies and procedures, and you can watch that and it'll tell you the standards. But anytime you have a question about that, go to dol.gov, which is departmentoflabor.gov, and it'll tell you. But workman's comp we covered in that new knowledge is the only reason I know the answer to that.
I was shocked when none of us had it in that last, and I thought, oh my gosh, because it had worried me all year long, and, not worried me enough.
You don't have to have it unless you have 3 employees, you don't have to have it.
Right,
And then generally, the owners are excluded.
right.
But in my opinion, from an insurance perspective, if you have one employee and you're riding bicycles or whatever it might be, and that person has no health insurance because you didn't provide it, and they don't have
Exactly.
it, or whatever, and they get hurt on the job, for a $400 policy for the year, it's really not that much to ask to help protect your employees,
And your rating's based on industry standard, so it doesn't matter how good you do, it's on the industry.
Okay,
So, I was in a high-risk industry, didn't matter what I had, my rates were always way up
Oh,
here
really?
because the industry was that. And so that's the other thing you gotta look at, your industry sector has an impact on what you pay.
I'm just dying to get her in Google now.
I have a workshop at home and I base my business out of that. Would it be advisable to insure that structure separately from my homeowner's policy, or is it even necessary?
Like all state insurance, you can't have a business in your home, okay? So it depends on your company and who you're insured with. I would contact your agent and ask them, and depending on the type of business, but typically business pursuit stuff, property is not covered under a regular homeowner's policy unless you have an amendment to your policy, or if it's covered to begin with, and if you might have an amendment to be able to cover $5,000 or $10,000 in computer equipment, or, a lot of people have their laptops and stuff at home now, so we do have what's called a business pursuit. If I have my personal stuff at home to work on, I can add that to my homeowner's policy. but I couldn't have my Allstate office in my house with Allstate. But different companies do different things. And, you know, it's always good, and I mean, from an accountant perspective or liability and attorney, it's always good to separate. You know, if you're going to have it as an LLC or whatever it might be, you might want to insure that portion as an LLC. You know, it just depends on the company that you have, really.
From a CPA standpoint, from a tax standpoint, is it beneficial to keep those separate?
Well, yeah, I mean, anything that you can separate, as April said, just gives you a clearer line of allocation of business versus non-business expenses.
What if you're looking to build like if it's an existing structure and you're looking to maybe go up and have a living space above and then have like a store and a studio beneath, how would you ensure that particular?
Anything that has a business in it typically needs a commercial policy, not a
And would
personal
that-
home policy or like a,
So would that include the personal part, or do you?
who would be living upstairs? A renter or would
No,
you be living?
I would be living.
It varies from company to company as to how they might insure that, but it's probably going to be a commercial policy because of the commercial exposure below. Okay, if you have people coming to your business, if they trip and fall and get hurt, it is a commercial exposure. It's very different than if I invited you over to my house as a friend for dinner and you fell. That's more of a personal level. But if I invite you to my house because I'm trying to sell you something or to my business, it's a commercial exposure. You know, so there's just different exposures, and that's why it's claimed a commercial policy.
But the commercial portion would cover the dwelling upstairs.
It should.
It should.
Yes. I mean, like I said, different companies have different policies and different guidelines on how they do that, but yes. Even like on a homeowner's policy, if someone rents the top of their garage, I still can insure that home, okay? And they just have a renter in that top portion. So that's different. But it's not a business, it's just a renter, okay?
So if we rent a storefront from Mr. X,
Okay.
and an employee or a customer gets hurt on that property, is the landlord responsible, or am I, the business owner, responsible?
It depends on what happened. Did they trip over, did they fall down the stairs that were crumbling as they walked out the door, which would be the liability exposure of the landlord? Or did they trip over the cord inside your store? You know what I mean? It just depends on who was really at fault as far as the liability. And anyone can sue you, you know, but you have to be able to prove negligence. If someone fell down the front of your steps at your business, and they are great steps, there's no crumbling, there's handrails, everything's protected, and they trip down your steps, you really aren't liable for that. You might have medical, a portion of your policy to cover some little medical if someone got hurt, but you weren't negligent. Now, if the handrail was flimsy and they went to go down the stairs and the handrail fell and they fell, then yes, you'd probably be found negligent. So anyone can sue you, but you just have to prove negligence, that, you know, something that you were negligent for to be sued for liability.
Let me expand on that, if I may.
Go ahead. You better turn it on. I knew that was.
The common areas, it's going to be a function of the terms of your lease. And the lease will set forth and describe who is responsible for maintaining areas within the premises. And so if you have common areas, then those common areas typically they're going to fall under the lease typically, but it depends on the lease. The landlord or the property owner will maintain responsibility and thus liability relative to those common areas. But it's really a function of the lease and what the lease states in terms of who is responsible. There's a duty of care that's owed. And so who has that duty of care relative to the space where the injury occurred? So it's going to be a function of your agreement.
Like, for example, the front of your store. If you're in a strip mall and you have a door that goes in, like the sidewalk area you're talking would be considered a common area. But in the lease, it might specify, and if it doesn't specify, I'm assuming that means it's the landlord's.
Yeah, some leases specify, for example, snow removal, that the tenant is responsible, and therefore the tenant has a duty of care. If the landlord is responsible for snow removal, maintenance of the sidewalk by the store, then the duty of care is retained by the landlord. So again, it's really a function of what of your agreement in terms of who retains that loan. And
sort of a nitpicky question, but I have kind of this exact actual thing happening right now, in that my lease does not specify anything about snow removal or care for the exterior steps that lead up to the entrance of my building. But my landlord doesn't do anything about snow because she's not around and I am, so I remove the snow from the walkways and from the stairs. There's also a stair that's really loose, they're wooden, that eventually someone's gonna fall on and nobody's fixed it, and so I've been thinking about fixing it myself, and then someone warned me that maybe I shouldn't do that. Is there sort of a, if I'm doing it, whether it's specified in the lease or not, does that show some sort of responsibility on my part and put me in a position where then if somebody falls, it is my responsibility because I've been taking care of it? Does that make sense?
Potentially. And the great thing is you were just recorded saying.
Great. Can I get my landlord's name?
I'm sure nobody's starting with everybody's. Is this building, are you the sole occupant of this
No.
lease space, or is it occupied by others?
There are just two of us. But the other woman I have most of it, and my landlord has space downstairs, but it's not currently open. And there's one other occupant in one small office on my floor upstairs, but I have most of the rest of the upstairs.
Okay, and your lease doesn't specify common areas or who is responsible?
It does inside the building, but nothing outside the building.
Now, the stairwell, is it
It's
inside the
outside.
building or is it on the
This one is
exterior?
outside. So it's a wooden staircase that leads from the parking lot to the back door. But it's the back door is where most people come in because they're parking back there.
Yeah, the problem is, okay, the better course of action would be for you to repair it. Because you're
For me to
aware of it.
repair it?
You're aware of it.
Right.
Or else you need to warn people.
I do warn people constantly.
No, but I mean, not verbally warn people.
Like
You
this
need
time. I was
You need
like,
to have something obvious that warns people of the risk that may not be readily apparent.
yeah.
Unless it's readily apparent.
No,
like the
it's
transmission or
gonna
something.
catch somebody off guard and they're gonna eat it. It's gonna be bad.
All right, recording once again.
Where is this? Where is this? And I'm nervous about going. No, I wanna go.
It makes me nervous,
As
right?
just told me I could get a half a meal.
Based on that statement, probably
You get a half a
should,
meal.
prevent people from using it, until it's repaired, and put up adequate warnings, visible day and night. If there is a risk that's not readily apparent, unless it's open and obvious. If it's open and obvious risk, you're not required to, but the better course is to protect yourself.
I mean, the most important thing to me is that I don't want someone to get hurt. But
Absolutely.
I also don't want to get hurt.
Okay, so here's the question, who maintains the exterior building?
Nobody.
Is it just pavement, or is there
It's pavement in the parking lot.
landscape?
Not really.
Just pavement?
And
Who
a public
maintains-
retaining wall.
Who maintains that?
Nobody.
Well, somebody,
I
nobody,
mean, my landlord owns it, but
But you're not required to, and he just doesn't do it.
exactly.
Okay.
It's just neglected, and I'm not required to.
how do you know you're not required?
Well, it's not on my lease.
How do you know you're not required?
I don't know, is there
You're
some
leasing
secret
space,
message I'm
are you
supposed to
not?
get?
No, what does your lease say? What are you leasing?
My lease only specifies things about the inside of the building. Doesn't say anything about
I
outside.
mean, as far as the description of the space you're renting, how does it describe it?
It describes the dimensions of each room that I rent on the inside.
To the exclusion of other rooms that you do not rent, that are in the same building, under the same roof.
Guilty.
I know, I'm like. That's why I'm asking you.
The court will adjourn and we'll see you.
I'm just trying to understand who's responsible for maintaining the exterior of the building.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not mentioned in my lease at all.
So for example, if your roof develops a leak, who is responsible for repairing that roof?
It already does, and.
How much do you pay for rent?
Not much, that's why I'm there.
That's a terrible lease.
Yeah, it's a terrible situation. What?
No, I was kidding.
I'll write
That
that
may not be
something.
terrible, but the roof, okay, so.
Yeah, so my landlord, well, here's the thing, I have a new landlord. The building just sold.
Oh.
So previously, when the roof was leaking, my landlord
which would seem to indicate your landlord is responsible for the exterior of the building.
Yes, that would be my guess. But I don't know what to do about that when I repeatedly ask my landlord to fix something and they don't fix it and it's causing a hazard to our clients, you know?
Have you put those notices in writing?
Yes.
Okay, because that should provide you with recourse back against your landlord if somebody's injured as a result of failure to maintain the exterior of the premises. Now, you are aware, as recorded here, that a staircase is not safe.
Right.
So,
Can I just fix it?
I think there's
Then that would
a-
be okay. I'd just like to fix the staircase.
I say we give her the 5,000.
Just one.
Yeah. I feel sorry for
You guys can all come make art, it'll be very therapeutic.
the problem is, though, you are somewhat admitting that you have a duty of care by doing that.
That was really the heart of my question is,
And so that, and then if it's not done adequately,
Right.
properly, workmanlike manner, now you exposed yourself as far as potential liability.
Right.
Something was leaking.
Can you access the building without using the stairway?
Well, yes, you could come in the front from Main Street.
There
There's
you
a
go.
door. There's a door.
The better course of action is provide written notice to your landlord. Explain in your notice that the landlord, particularly now you have a new owner, that the landlord is responsible for the maintenance of the exterior of the building.
Okay.
Block off that stairway because you know that there is a problem with that and repeatedly notify them that this needs to be repaired, it's a danger, somebody could be injured, and repeatedly say, it is their responsibility, it is your responsibility that, to maintain the exterior.
Okay.
So that way it's clear from your perspective that it's their responsibility, they owe a duty of care. And it's not your responsibility.
Right.
I think it is, I was trying to understand who's responsible for maintaining the exterior of the building. And that needs to be set forth in the lease, it's not. But I think the fact that they have done work on the roof, the description of the premises only relates to the interior. I think that seems to support the fact that you're not responsible for maintaining the exterior. At the same time, you are aware of it, so I would take action to protect, or at least try to, as much as possible, minimize my exposure.
And I can tell you that I had a shop for 30 years and I had two situations. I'll tell you quickly about one, but a lady came in a pair of flip-flop high heels. She was bound and determined that she was gonna see a hairdresser that was busy. And she whirled around and tripped over her flimsy high heel shoes and saw that she was falling and turned and fell on her shoulder and broke her shoulder. And to make a very long story short, I wanted to fight it in court and the insurance company went ahead and settled. So, because some of it's not worth the legal fees. So, it can happen. And we have to leave, we have to practice for the Rotary Frolics. And if you all haven't seen the Frolics, you need to buy tickets and come Friday night to support a good cause. But what I want you all to think about before we leave is this. If you have questions about topics that you need for your business plan, and these are all very interesting, but you're covering liability, you're kind of not covering financial, business structure, some of the things that you might need to make that winning business plan. Think of things that are going to help you win the challenge as far as this writing your business plan is concerned. But thank you all. Thank you, bosses. See you.
This might be more for a one-on-one, but so I have an LLC that's registered right now, and in the next year or so, I'm going to open up a small manufacturing. I don't know how to register that. Do I just annul my LLC, or I don't know how to, if I just keep those two separate companies. One of them was a clothing company, and I do custom clothing. Now I'm wanting to open up a manufacturer where it'll be a small manufacturing.
Related business to.
Similar, but it's more of a business that we're getting to retail stores. I'm going to keep my custom side of it custom where it's we're just now talking about like what that looks like.
And so, there's no reason to set up another LLC if it's the same owners.
Right.
It's just that you've expanded the type of business that you're conducting.
Right.
There's really no reason to, it's a related business.
Right.
I don't see a reason to establish another.
I just didn't know.
But if you have a,
keep it separate.
well, only if you have different owners, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you're gonna have different owners, you will need to establish another entity.
Right.
But if not, if it's the same owners,
Yeah.
and it's just it's an extension of your existing business,
And
there's
keep it
really
in
no
LLC.
benefit to be gained, that I can think of,
Okay.
from establishing another.
Now,
Go
if
into
I,
the expense of doing it.
so if I kept that in LLC and ended up getting a partner, would I change the LLC to just keep it in LLC?
Well, that person would invest,
Right.
whatever that is,
Right.
in order to acquire that ownership interest. So then they would acquire an ownership interest in the existing business.
Okay.
Sometimes we'll use two different entities if they're entirely different
Right.
operations.
This is just, it's just. a
Or
growing
you have
business.
different goals with one.
Right.
One, your manufacturing entity may become more capital intensive,
Right.
may throw off some different financial tax aspects that you really don't want to share or have the other entity exposed to. So there are times when you split them up
Right.
also.
The money's all going.
Sometimes simple is better.
Yeah.
One thing very important, and some of you have already established LLCs, you will lose your personal liability protection by commingling personal assets and business assets. And that happens far too often. So what am I saying? The business needs a separate account, needs a separate checking account. The assets need to be in the name of the business. You do not need to write checks for personal expenses out of the business account. If you're
Groceries.
Right.
Right, exactly.
Keep it separate.
Even if you're the sole owner,
Mhm.
and you think, well, it's me, that's me, and it's all the same, and it all ends up in the same place. If you start doing that, commingling assets, you destroy that protection in terms of personal liability. You might as well not even have set up the LLC.
Right.
You cannot commingle assets.
Does that work also with like using a vehicle for transport in terms of commingling
Need
as
more
an
information.
asset? Like,
For example, give me,
like we own a juice company, so say we were doing a juice delivery.
right.
So that, at that point, the asset's being used specifically for the juice company. Is that considered commingling with a personal vehicle?
Do you have a separate entity established to operate your business?
Yeah. But the vehicle is owned personally?
But the vehicle is owned personally, but you're using it for business purposes as opposed to the other way where the vehicle is titled in the name of the business and you're using it for personal purposes, is that correct?
Right.
And so how is that treated? I mean, do you depreciate the vehicle? How are you treating that vehicle?
Mileage?
Mileage reimbursement?
Right.
Okay. That's not, the commingling takes place where you start using business assets for personal use, that are in a separate entity. Now, you can have a sole proprietorship, and that's very different. What I'm talking about is a liability issue. You're trying to protect yourself from exposure to unlimited personal liability, and so you have business assets, and you use them as your own personal assets, but they're in a corporation, or they're in a limited liability company. By doing that, you destroy what is the veil of limited liability when you start doing that. What you're describing is different than that. You're, in effect, using your personal asset, it's in your name for business purposes, and then you're being reimbursed for its use. That's not the commingling that I was trying to describe. Does that make sense?
For a very small company with a small income, why do I choose Spiegler Blevins and Company over Joe Blow Tax Preparer?
It's a commercial. Well, the professionals at Spiegler Blevins. Well, you know, for the biggest part, I'd say that most tax returns, 1040s can be done by anybody. Most of them are simple, itemized deductions, not a lot going on. But once you jump into the business realm, there is a difference in who's doing your taxes. You you know, it's, a lot of times you can get, and with some of the tax services, they have good people, but, you know, it's a second job. And they're not, they don't know the laws, they don't read the updates every day like a CPA firm would. So, you know, there are just a lot of complexities, you know, by what we do every day. For example, and I'm not giving a commercial for myself, or for any CPA firm, you know, I've been doing it, I don't know, 32 years. And, you know, I dare say I can pick everybody in this room, what type of business you have, and tell you something about it, how it operates, you know, what drives your profit, or whatever. And that's the kind of stuff you get from CPA that you don't necessarily get.
And sometimes there are things that you can write off that you just didn't even know you could write off. You know, if I purchase another business with Allstate or whatever, you know, I can amortize that over 15 years. You know, I mean, there's all kinds of things that, you know, that you can benefit from having an accountant and having them tell you what you can and can't do. What kind of gifts you can give your employees and what you're supposed to write off that you give your employees. Our recent BVU scandal opened a lot of eyes at that point, just for giving $100 gift cards or $50 gift cards is supposed to be counted as income for employees. So, you know, I mean, there's lots of different things that accountants, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, there's just lots of things that you just have to protect yourself, and just not knowing doesn't count with the IRS. You know, I mean, it's your responsibility to know and be aware of what you can and can't do. And that's where the CPA, if you go in and they see something and they're like, oh, well, what were you doing with this, and ask you questions, it's like, well, you can't do that.
We're gonna ask
You know,
questions.
so.
And there are times when we say, you don't want us to do this return, just because we know there's an issue there that somebody else probably won't catch.
So obviously it's tax season right now, and my partner and I are filing together, we're married. Do I keep my business separate? Should I file separately? Or should we file all together?
As far as married filing separately or filing joint,
Right.
there are parts of your tax return that will decide whether or not there's a benefit to doing either one.
Right.
So it's just an analysis that has to be done. Generally, you know, most of the time you come out better filing jointly, but your tax return should look at both aspects.
Right. So you would recommend having, like, for me to sit down with somebody instead of trying to do it myself? Would you try to do it last time?
Well, if you have a business, there are at least some questions that somebody
Right.
should be asking.
Well, there's, like, you know, we ran into this situation, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Kickstarter. It's a crowdsourcing, and so you get money from raising funds through Crabtree. I didn't know how to, and on the Kickstarter website it tells you, like, this is how you file it, but it's only if you've made 20,000 or more, then they'll send you a 1099 or whatever, and something. But I never received one of those, and I didn't make that much, but I didn't know how to file it. Right, so I didn't know if I needed a reporter that's like a gift, or how to report.
I don't know what are the general aspects of that relationship. Are you required to give it back to the have ownership?
What what it is like it's either all or nothing, and they take a fee out of it, for the website, and then you get the amount back of what is left over from after that fee, and it's, you know, deposited into your checking account, which you pay. In that case, I put it into my business account and I used it for business expenses or what it was supposed to be. Right. I just didn't know how to file it, so I'm probably gonna sit down and talk with you.
Then we'll have to talk.
Okay, thank you.
And I would tell you, even though you know, I mean, I've been in business for a while, and my dad was too, and my brother is too, and you think if you go to a CPA, it's gonna cost you a fortune. And I will tell you, in past experience, having 3 hours of CPA and spending $500 to $700, $800, whatever it might be, you know what I mean, depending on who does your return at that office. And you can go down the street to maybe another company that's advertised greatly at tax season time, and they take a percentage of your return or your profit or whatever it might be, and, you know, you spend just as much, and you probably do not have near the wealth and depth of the knowledge that a CPA firm might have, especially when you're in business. There are just so many
little things that they just miss and that you can write off or that you can do. And I would just recommend finding an accountant that you trust and that you like and use an accountant, you know, for your business. Because you'd be surprised at what you might miss as well. And I know that you all, for those of you that are in business or starting or whatever, but like they say with the S Corp or the LLC, let's say your business makes $35,000 profit that year, okay? And he said you don't pay taxes on the $35,000. It rolls over to your personal taxes and is added to any money that you might have made or your spouse might have made. It's counted as income on the personal taxes. So that's what you made the comment, I think, that you don't pay the business taxes, it rolls over to your personal taxes and pay it out of your personal. That's how that S Corp works and that LLC works, right?
And I'll tell you, there are, just like in any other business, there are good CPA firms, there are not so good CPA firms. There are good non-CPA tax preparers, and there are not so good non-CPA tax preparers. So it's like anything else. Go talk to a couple people, you know, see, get a feeling, find out what they're doing, how they do it, see what kind of interest they take in your business, what they can land to you as far as knowledge.
As I've said earlier, I run my business out of a shop at my house. The business does not pay rent. In lieu of that, it pays the electric bill. Is that okay? And how much, if any of that, can I benefit from tax-wise?
You cannot pay rent to yourself and take a deduction. So basically, it comes down to an allocation of expenses based upon some basis. In your case, you know, if you only have one electric meter, then it might be based on square footage. Same thing goes with insurance. You know, if you have one insurance policy on your shop and your house, and you know, your insurance agent doesn't know that there's business in there, and they haven't told you you need a separate policy, or there's not a separate premium for that aspect, and it all just becomes allocated based on square footage.
Should you, like, we have a shop that we operate Adventure Mendota out of, and it's just Adventure Mendota's in the shop, you know, we don't live, like our electric meter and things are in our personal name. Does that make a difference? I don't even think we're paying for it with the business right now, we're still paying it ourselves, but I guess we should be paying for it.
From a tax standpoint, something like that doesn't matter, as long as it's going to the business, you know, whether or not it exposes you to any liability, I don't think so, but something
it's strictly for the
as
business.
straightforward as that, it's not really.
It's some meter, and you know, it's obvious we're using it just for that.
Do you have did you say earlier, you set up a LLC?
Yes. I didn't say so, but we did.
Okay, all right.
Why?
Just raise your mind, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You know, the only way that would give rise to a potential issue from a liability perspective is if the account in the name of the LLC was paying your personal utilities.
Yeah, it's not. In fact, we've been paying that bill with our personal account because we're still so little. Like right now, you know, we're out of money for the year. We're paying everything with our own money.
There is a risk of treating, for example, you set up a separate business, but you treat it as yourself. And so it's a matter to the extent to which you do that. Now, okay, if that's an isolated answer, but if you conduct the business as if it is you, which is tempting to do because it's your business.
Right.
And so that's the only way that would potentially be a negative, I guess, from that, you know, analyzing it, whether or not you are the business is you.
Right. It'd probably be smart just to go ahead and move it over to.
It would be. It would be. It would just take the uncertainty out of it.
Right.
We tell clients all the time, you have an entity. It's a separate and distinct entity in the eyes of the law. Treat it as if it's a separate entity. Keep its transactions separate from yours and yours from yours.
If you don't, and you treat it as if it is you, and if you ever have an issue concerning liability, then you can be treated as a sole proprietorship.
Right. One thing that we've been doing too, and I think we're okay doing it, you know, because we let people picnic on the property. That's, you know, all that's written up in our with our insurance. And people are walking on the property. We're doing kayaking and tubing and things like that. We started having the employees in their downtime and this is in their job descriptions, doing, weed eating and mowing, because they always did it for us before anyway. But now we're paying them out of Adventure Mendota. Is that, because they're taking care of the grounds where the business is, but it also is our home is up on the hill too. Is that acceptable, or is that just a blurry line that we just?
I'm not sure I understand.
Okay.
Wait, let me ask, the premises of your business, is it distinguishable from your residence? So,
It's 6 acres, all fenced in together, but it is a separate building. It's a separate building, separate utilities, everything.
but it's in your individual name still.
Uh-huh.
The property
Oh, yeah.
is, there's a deed.
Oh,
there,
yes.
And there's no,
But the riverbank, it's all weedy, and part of our business is keeping that so people can get access to the river to kayak or tube. So we have them weedy.
so there's no agreement. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, but actually you may need an agreement. There's no agreement that exists between the entity and the owner of the residence.
No, we just assume, we are both.
No, you don't want to be.
Yeah, I know, we don't need that. But no, there is no agreement. It's just whenever we have these employees at this downtime, we have this property that needs to be maintained because we have customers on it.
Okay, this is gonna sound ridiculous, and, there are many situations that give rise to ridiculous situations, but nevertheless, it's necessary, such as sitting down, there are 2 of you, and having an annual meeting feels ridiculous. But, this is gonna be another one of those situations. You need some kind of formal structure in terms of the relationship between your business and the use of that property, and the owner of the property, which is
So confusing.
you and your spouse, whoever owns the house.
Yes.
So, well, it's not really confusing. Think about it. The business it's set up as a separate entity by the state, and so it is a legal person. So think of it, you're dealing with somebody, it's you, but in terms of the owners, but you're dealing with somebody else.
So should it be paying us rent?
Yes. So you need a lease agreement that clearly defines what property is your business leasing from you. And then that
You can't afford to pay me yet.
$1 is payment.
But that way you're not, right now, you're treating the business is you and you are the business
Right.
relative to the use of the property. And that is counter to maintaining the veil of limited liability.
Okay.
So you need an agreement between the business, the separate entity, and the owner of the property.
Okay, and just a little notarized agreement?
Doesn't have to be notarized.
Okay.
It needs to take the form of a contract,
Okay, and it's something we maybe just attach and keep with our,
a lease agreement.
okay,
A lease agreement.
okay.
And specify in the lease agreement who's responsible for maintaining that property. Make it clear that it's the entity that runs the business, that's who's responsible.
And you and your husband are owners of the LLC?
Yes, we are.
So it's a separate.
And it's.
He didn't show up tonight, I don't know.
Yeah, it's overwhelming though with all the things, we had a very good year, but I can't imagine if we hadn't, that I would even want to stay in business. There's so many things to keep up with a small business. It's just almost overwhelming.
I was gonna
And
see
it's
if anybody here
expensive,
wanted
too.
to buy a small business.
Yeah.
So you're not required to do what I just described, you're not required.
But
You
it's
can operate as a
smart.
partnership or sole proprietorship. The type of business you're in that I heard you just describe, I could not sleep at night. If I was operating that business personally as a sole proprietorship or a partnership.
Yeah.
Because you are 100% of everything you own or ever thought about owning is at risk. And so you must protect yourself. Are you required to? No, of course not.
And that lease agreement is a big
I
step
would
in
operate
doing
without
that.
doing it.
And
It's-
that,
Think about, okay, your LLC, that's a separate person.
right.
Now, what all do you need in order for that business to operate, distinguish it from you and your husband? And one thing relates to possession of property. Think of it as if you're dealing with somebody else.
So write a note to yourself asking for permission.
Well, I think it's just a contract, like you said.
It's going to be a contract between the LLC and the owners of the property. That's you and your husband.
And what we're gonna do is outline, responsibilities that the LLC has in maintaining that property And since they're really, maybe they pay us $1 a month right now, maybe later when we become more profitable, they can pay us more.
Right, well, you need to specify right of possession, so it's a lease agreement.
Okay.
So, like, the LLC is renting space from you and your owner.
Okay.
That'll also save you some self-employment taxes if you can actually pay some rent.
Yeah, when we make some money.
This may be a silly question, but are there exemptions for renovations?
Exemptions from,
Well, say, could you, like if you have to renovate this dilapidated building in order to start the business, are there exemptions?
deductions.
Yeah, something, yeah.
So typically in the startup phase, you need to think that, and I tell clients all the time when they say, what's deductible? And I say, well, think of it from the standpoint, if you didn't have to spend that money, had it not been for your business, it's more than likely a deduction or a business expense of some kind. In your case, if you're having to remodel or improve a building for your business, it's probably some kind of leasehold improvement that may qualify for having a deduction, or you may have to capitalize it and depreciate it over a period of time, depending on the nature of the expense.
Would it be smarter to have an attorney or a CPA on retainer than to just like wait for the situation comes up?
We can afford it.
I can tell you from a CPA standpoint, probably not. Most small businesses, we don't do retainer agreements. All firms operate different. We welcome calls from clients. If you establish a relationship with a CPA, they should take your call and help you out, not always send you a bill. I don't know if local attorneys do it anymore.
I'm a licensed attorney in Virginia, Tennessee, but I don't have public practice. I don't accept clients, but, so I'm not offering anything. So straight up and honest. The answer is no. You don't need that. Attorneys like to enter into those agreements because those are nice arrangements to have, where you have a steady income generated from client. But unless your business is substantial enough that you have ongoing legal issues where you need to get over to pick up the phone and call and ask, multiple questions, because they bill by the hour and they're gonna bill you a minimum fraction of the hour every time they call. Exactly.
Every 6 minutes.
So that way you have more certainty in terms of maybe what your expenses are, even though, if it runs over, you're going to pay it more. But that's so you know that they're readily available to answer your question. They should be readily available anyway. And for a small business, it's not worth, I wouldn't do it. Simple answer, no.
I was just wondering if you did need that to build a relationship.
You just need to find yourself an attorney, CPA, go and make an appointment, introduce yourself, tell them what go have a meeting, tell them, look, I'm starting a business, and I'm looking for a CPA, go interview them. Most CPAs and probably most attorneys don't charge for an initial consultation.
Right.
Then you can figure out who you want, you can say, hey, I'd like to do business with you, I just want you to know, I'll give you a call as I need things, or here's what I'm gonna need.
What type of business are you?
I'm thinking about starting a sporting goods store.
Okay.
I'm just trying to get all the information.
You'll have, on the front end, your expenses will be greater, but there should be no ongoing need unless, something is causing you to suffer greater risk to be calling an attorney on a regular basis.
I have a question. Do you recommend any programs that are online to develop an LLC, or should you do it through a lawyer initially, then start out and then going on from there, or
Okay.
what do you recommend?
I mentioned I'm not selling anything, and I'm not selling anything on behalf of anybody. So this is just my perspective, my thought. There are very inexpensive services for establishing corporations, LLCs, and so forth via the internet. The problem is, and the risk you're incurring by doing that is, if it's not established properly and maintained properly, then you've wasted your money. And you've received no protection whatsoever, even though you feel like you've done something. So my advice is don't do that. It's tempting because it will not cost much, but you may end up with no protection at all. You're much better off having somebody licensed in this state, if this is the state where you're operating, that can advise you on the proper way to establish that and what's required to be taken. And you're not gonna get that over there.
And if you have done that already, you might just wanna make it a formal attorney.
That's, okay, that's
You know,
great, right, that's
I mean,
great.
you know, probably a lot of businesses do, a lot of small businesses go online, I mean, that's what a lot of people do. You know, so, I mean, just keep that in mind, that just, even though you've done it, that doesn't mean that you still can't go meet with someone and have them look over your information and either get their advice, correct it, change it, whatever you need to do.
Yeah, not only does it not mean it, I would highly encourage you to go do that, yes, exactly. That's great advice.
Because it seems like this is the foundation where everything else is gonna fall off of, taxes, the legal, every aspect of the business, to start from how you're, operating legally to, make sure that everything, is done correctly. So that's probably the first thing we need to do. Even though, I'll probably, know that other things is gonna fill in, but basically, cause I was going towards sole proprietorship mostly, but I have very high liability, very high.
What type of business?
It's therapeutic horsemanship with schools.
Yeah, okay, yes. You need to protect yourself. Yes. I'm going to expand on what Kathy Lowe said as she left here. She's gone now, so I can say this. I know. I'd like to give all her time anyway. She mentioned that you're spending a lot of time talking about liability and, why not discuss financial, and it's actually related to what you just said. In case this is stating the obvious, but liability is financial, and it's extremely important, particularly here in this country, it's extremely important. People are looking at policy, and so you need to protect yourself, and that is financial. So I agree with you, just, that's part of the initial actions you need to take, particularly in a business like that. If you operate as a sole proprietorship, I said I couldn't sleep with this business. I absolutely couldn't sleep with that business.
You're gonna be really tired.
That would be terrible.
Well,
I think what is my liability exposure is probably the first question.
Absolutely.
And then, because once you get past that, you can have the same tax answer as to which entity you choose, regardless of whether you chose an LLC or a corporation.
Right.
So you gotta answer the liability question first.
and even as a business owner, you have a business and you've done an LLC and you think that you've done everything correctly, and there's, something happens and an attorney finds a hole, you commingle the funds, not realizing it. That's the whole end to your personal assets. You need to look at your personal assets and personal liability as well. You know what I mean, to make sure that you've protected yourself. We, as agents, we joke and say that when you drive in your car, everything you own is in your trunk. Same thing with the business, especially if you're an S corp or if there's a wiggle room for an attorney, to see that there might be a wiggle room to get to your personal assets. I mean, everything's in your business or everything's in your trunk. So you just need to make sure that you've protected yourself as best as you can in the event that something happens. Bad things happen every day. True accidents, things happen. Someone can get hurt at your business, a horse can kick a child. I mean, true accidents happen without anyone ever meaning to. No drinking, driving, they just truly happen. So you just have to protect yourself, And you can buy a gazillion things of insurance, but I want to know that if I did have an accident, that I've at least somewhat protected myself on my personal side and my business side. And if it goes above that, so be it. But at the same point, I've protected myself enough to where I've at least protected my asset in the business, or what debt you may owe in the business or whatever it might be. Whether you go out and get a life insurance policy to cover your debt from whatever business or to protect something for you if something were to happen to you, you just don't know what's going to happen. I'm not trying to say you don't buy a ton of insurance policies, but, everyday accidents happen. I had a friend driving a van, hooked up a trailer to it, taking a washer and dryer to another friend's house. The trailer came loose. The trailer was like a bullet, hit 3 Harley-Davidson motorcycle riders. Did not kill them, but the first rider lost his leg. They have lost, his wife's a teacher, he was a hourly employee, they had 2 small children, they no longer own their home, and about 8 months ago, they got sued for $300,000 for the differences from the insurance, when, their car insurance and stuff paid out. And that was a true accident, and for the rest of his life, they will deduct up to 17%, if I'm correct, they can, of his salary, his monthly income, paycheck or whatever, to pay the people for the damages. A judge can rule that. So, and it could be more, I don't know. But, there are just true accidents that happen, and you just need to protect yourself, as best as you can.
At what point do you set up the entity for a new business? Clearly, you need to do it before the doors open because you need the insurance. You need to establish that entity in order to determine how much you're going to be paying for all that. But when is a good time to decide that entity, and when should you establish that?
It should be one of the first steps that you take as you conceptualize your business and get your questions answered. And once you figure out that, hey, I need an entity, you're going to need the name of the entity to basically start registering and for account numbers and title and assets or whatever the case might be. So you really can't do any of that until you have your entity name and type chosen.
Okay, so like now, if you're a new startup business, you should be trying to meet with a lawyer and figure out which entity is best for you.
Yes.
And establish that now.
Yeah, as Mike said earlier, some businesses are inherently higher risk than others. Got one here, got one there.
Bluegrass.
I think that helps drive the urgency. It's a very low risk business. It's always better to defend yourself than not. But the urgency is greater for higher risk type businesses.
And what all do you need in order to go see the lawyer? What all types of information do you need in order to figure out?
That's a good question.
Which entity, like?
Cash.
I
was
No, you need to have readily available all the information concerning the business, the activities you plan to conduct, what assets need to be included in the business, what liabilities, if any, there are in terms of property that's occupied. Is it you have customers coming onto your property in terms of from the public or not? Those type of questions. The lawyer will lead you through.
So if we can go with, do we need to have our business plan set and?
You don't need a business plan, but you need to be able to answer the attorney's question. And it would be a good idea to have as far financial type information in terms of assets. If there need to be, assets need to be transferred into the name of the business, if that separate entity is established, what are they? And be able to fully describe all the activities of the business. How you plan to conduct the business. The attorney should be able to lead you forward at that point and tell you what they need in order to properly advise you.
They may not know the most or all the aspects of taxation. So sometimes they'll defer to your CPA. A lot of times, clients don't know who to defer to CPA.
Well, yeah, so who do you?
So,
Stands for that.
I can tell you that my experience is generally, I don't give legal advice when clients come to see me, but I have a good feeling for whether or not they need an entity or not. So I'm going to tell them what I think they need, and I'm going to tell them, go talk to the attorney, and if he agrees, then this is what you need from a tax standpoint. And a lot of times, I'll just call the attorney and say, hey, Katie's coming to see you, she's starting this kind of business, this is what we talked about, what do you think?
So it's recommended by you to see the CPA first?
I put on my attorney hat and I agree with Mike. It's better to go see the CPA first for the reasons he just stated, and then go see the attorney.
So if you're looking for your attorney, and I guess you could get a referral from someone, or you're looking in the phone book, you don't want somebody who practices family law. What are you looking? What are you looking for? For small business?
Not someone who practices family.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm trying to think. I've never looked in the phone book for an attorney.
No, don't look in, does anybody look in, I guess you can still look in.
Yeah, I can only have phone book.
No matter, even if
I'm
you
gonna
start
Google
with
it.
a say good business attorney, you're gonna get a divorce attorney or
Yeah,
real
no,
estate
you know,
attorney.
no, that's typically, if you have a CPA, your CPA can probably recommend
That's the one.
attorneys they've worked with. I assume, for example, Mike could recommend several, potential attorneys, and you can go from there. There are attorneys, that's what they do. So, you know, they specialize in business law, typically business, corporate commercial.
We generally know who does a lot of business work and who will really fit your needs.
Right, and who's affordable.
So here's a one kind of part story of how I messed up my first year, and then kind of a question within it. When we started our business in Abingdon the first year, I used my home address in Damascus as my business address. So then the next year, after I applied with the state corporation committee right away, and I had that done the first year. But now the second year, I'm in Abingdon, and they have that Damascus address, and the forwarding has ended. And so I don't get that paperwork from the SEC that my fee is done, is due that year, which I didn't know that was a fee every year. So now I lost my status, I guess, and then had to pay a fine or a fee, whatever, to get my status back. So one is be aware that state corporation committee fee is coming every year, correct? And then, and Mike actually helped me my first year, and we switched my entity from an S corp to an LLC. And so now, throwing myself under the bus, I know in the partnership we have an SEC report due for our new business this year. Is there LLC stuff that was due that I've clearly never done?
There's an annual registration.
Other than just the annual registration?
No, not in Virginia.
Okay.
There's the annual registration with the Secretary of State, and then there's your LLC tax return.
Right, but okay.
Unless he was saying that you needed to do minutes.
We need to, right.
Right.
You need to meet periodically, depending on how you're structured. So if you operate as a board-managed LLC, then you need to meet on an annual basis.
And what do you do with that?
Make minutes and say you met, and say the business.
And send that in?
No,
just for you.
You maintain,
Just
you maintain a minute, it just it's evidence of the fact that you're maintaining the LLC.
What if you're just one person?
Talk to yourself.
Don't
So your lawyer, when you set this up, they'll be able to explain to you exactly what you are gonna be responsible for?
Yes.
For whichever entities?
Yes.
I would take notes every time and keep stuff in a similar book, like they were talking about, not just the notes for that, but everything gets so overwhelming, what you're supposed to do. And just like he said, he changed his address and moved and didn't even, the forwarding ran out after 6 months, and it didn't even dawn on him about the State Corporation Commission, because there's just things that you do so much right in the beginning that you might not remember. So, maybe a list of things that I have to do annually, and to remember to do that. Because you could also contact them and change your address and do whatever you needed to do to get a new form for that.
The alternative is to name your attorney as the registered agent, but unless you just want to pay fees, they would protect you in that situation. They would charge a fee.
They charge you generally $150 to do your minutes, and another $150 to fill out your form.
I'm working with my business banker about a program that they offer to do the payroll. They charge $45 for the first 3 employees, and then $75 for up to 10. Then it goes up from there. They file all the federal taxes, state taxes, everything for those employees. They do all of that mine work for me. In doing QuickBooks for the rest of the company, do I still need to hire the CPA for the end of the year to close my books?
Okay. I I'll tell you about payroll. Most banks aren't doing the payroll themselves, they're outsourcing. And they're outsourcing it most of the time to a national company. And your support is gonna be somebody, maybe in another country, maybe
She's
not.
in Blacksburg.
Okay, I was gonna say, and generally what happens is you don't get the same person twice, so.
Well, they take 100% of the liability. If something is wrong with the federal government or the state government taxes, they will take the liability for it.
And that's generally true with any payroll company. Now, as far as your books, you use QuickBooks. So, I'm sorry, your question, I know your question was, should the CPA close it out for the year?
Yes.
Yeah, I would recommend that, yeah, so whoever's gonna do your taxes should be looking at your books and what we call tying down the balance sheet, making sure that your numbers are real, analyzing them, looking for opportunities, and from those numbers will be used to prepare your tax return. So you have to have a CPA or a qualified tax preparer who knows how to analyze books and basically close them out for the year.
Spending cash.
Y'all just make my anxiety go here.
Kyle's not gonna sleep.
He's not gonna sleep, and I'm just gonna chew on my nails.
I would never let him on that boat.
That's what lawyers do.
You know, it's so funny, we had a group of lawyers that came out and kayaked with us last year, and it was the worst, and we had a storm. We didn't want to put them on the river, they insisted. It was crazy. Anyway, one of them called us this week and said, you know, we still talk about what a good time we had, but then he got around, he says, can you help me sell my 2 kayaks? I was like, yes. We'll help you.
Any other questions? Speak now, for Coach Pitts. Well, I want to thank each one of you for taking the last hour, almost an hour and a half. Gosh, it flew by, I couldn't imagine when I saw the time, but I hope you got something out this first part of this tonight's session. And I know that Lee was out there making notes like crazy.
Oh,
and you're gonna sleep tonight?
Huh? No, I'm just gonna chew my nails. He's gonna be up. Let's go to JJ's.
But I want to thank each one of you. What we're going to do is take about a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back. And Burleson-Gibson is here with U.S. Census and is going to give you a little short primer on how you can use the census data to help you in developing your business plan. And we're lucky to have her just worked out, because I wish we had you the last 2 years to come with this part early on in the session. So thank you. Each of you. So, take a quick break.
Sorry.
You're just gonna start drawing.
How did it come up and play once you open up at the same time? I love to do all that stuff, you know, listen to what you got to do. When I was talking to you, I mentioned.
No, I've heard lots about you. No, only good things. I'm with Chris, I'm with Jason. In fact, I'm with
All right, great. You covered all the
except a little part of it.
Yeah, like so.
Yeah, I'm a coworker.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, anything with the project for a kind of forensic thing. Let me know. No, I saw some other businesses, and I have to do software 16 about managing the business. Having run several businesses for me, I laugh at you questions.
I just have an door for okay.
Dad, like a break. Don't understand what data and how much information you give them to get a leg up versus to kind of do a little bit, you know, and they focus on like a business, focus on not the rest. I know you're gonna. Yeah. Good luck with it.
Why did I bring you to all my stuff? How do you say that?
That's fine. Just tell me where I'm going.
See, that's Buchanan's one. He's so unique. He takes you so you actually know about the game, so he knows companies.
And that's, well, that's all.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, you know, something like that. Like that could change, that could be torn together like
The water damage of California. Most towns try to get out of
We don't want it. Maybe we didn't
you know what I mean? Because then he wins. You guys
take them up, drop them off, and then.
That's what would happen to me. I would come.
I was just telling him, I said,
Would you transport me up, whatever, throw me in the water?
It's 5 miles up there.
So anytime between 10 and 11,
And we launch it there, then we do 5 miles.
Yeah, it's just hard to, you know, we're launching, we're investing a lot in our community.
Well, I mean, you can see, take all that, you can pull over, and get out and stand, you know.
Well, it was when you can be so sure, but we can tell you.
Really, they do like an spot.
it's definitely
So, but all the
Years ago, when I was a younger fellow, and I was on the water and so forth, we had a lot more access to come down. We didn't care so much, we'd go back to the property and get off that. You know, but I understood that. As long as you're on call, whatever. But it's really, they actually,
I don't know, he thought that was I mean, if you can, now that you
yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's the point of lawmaking. Reinforced. But some people abuse access, and like abuse the land.
it's always different.
And you know, and it's like,
Doesn't make sense to put more equipment down there.
and then they thought the track, you know.
I don't know, I mean, it's not like a
If you want,
well, that's why I kind of want to think about like,
if you advertise, at the F Center.
yeah, and then later, if we get this retail
We teach advertising.
retail shop should be open.
I don't want to what I'm gonna do is, I'm thinking about.
Which, I mean, mean, really, it's just a gym.
Right, but you have a retail shop, you have a juice shop.
Well, that's why we got parked next door. Commercial, and we have somebody in the street.
Let them be sort of the golden age, if you will, they'll supply the money. All they'll do is they'll
I'm not trying to
put their logo on it. I've been doing it for years, the Highlands Festival.
See, that's what we wanted to sell the ultra.
I would bring
But that happens to like, I think
production flag, you might put on the lamp posts around town, and there'd be a tear off on the label. Part of the flag was used for several years, and 5-year contract, they just said, we're going to read that out back when I
So the first four.
every year for 5 years, so they had a part of the outdoor company had a part of the three-way split, so so I just discovered that's the last thing they think about. Barbecue event, or just, and then they don't figure out, tell somebody about it. I know, we'll go to the TV station. Too many of those reporters. That gets regularly covered, goes to the website. See, now all these meetings have a website. Have their own website.
I just remember I worked at Chicago company, I was involved in HR. I worked in corporate comp. And that night, when I asked them to the interview, I was so mad at them. Here, 700 here.
Paying for their time.
It doesn't make sense. And you're trying to, you're making the rules, and you know that other places are not.
They make millions with the kids, because I just know alcohol and no cigarettes no longer got enough. But
I will talk about it now, but I might be
sometimes I feel like that's close to home, and invite friends over, and you say, my friends hang out. Because they would come and shake hands on us, but then you're, you know, they, in other words, you're pay for what they eat.
Right.
And just enjoy the music. It's my jam. It's sometimes the way I like to. Boy,
So are you small business or 501c3?
no, I'd like to
Be a 501c3. How did they stay out?
well, I have to choose. Always only, we buy gas cards, right? That's the biggest thing you give to. Do I want to adjust for that? I think establish what I'm going to say. I'll be ready to do whatever I want to, be whatever I want to. Hold on, ma'am. This is my gun. This is my gun. Let me show you my tax record.
Right there.
This is my tax record. You're gonna love this. You're gonna love it. You ready for this? No one comments.
Oh, how neat. You got your 8-track.
The beach is great.
Those are the things I listen to.
I've already got this one on eBay. I've already got this one on eBay.
Donna Summer. Oh my gosh.
That
You
Mike?
bought it? Oh,
Yeah, I bought
it
it.
for
It's
Wall.
bought and paid for.
He was so cute. You know what I mean? Why did he go and do that all himself? Toto, I don't like for Harvard. Toto, come something. 99. I'm 38 special. I remember that. Boss Skaggs, do you remember him? Oh, that was like disco, wasn't it?
Excuse me, according to the tax people, I need to know if any of you won that scratch-off ticket. I'm gonna have to file that. I'm gonna have to file that as a gift.
We never scratched it, it's still sitting on the table.
Oh, I see how it is. It's all where you sit, ma'am.
See where I sat tonight, Marla.
Right by Marla. If you didn't bring anything but your day track. This is one of my favorites.
Come on.
Yeah, I'm too high.
I gotta drive all the way to DC and I don't have an 8-track in my truck.
But this one's funny. You'll think of things and sing. You sing out loud.
Oh, are you kidding me?
And I sound good.
I do too. I listen to me all the time.
Okay.
I know.
Ready?
I'm not sure about you.
As weird as you say about us placing things.
You're holding up production.
Don't make me break out the mom/little league coach voice, okay? I will do that. I'll be here. Hey, hi, good afternoon, evening, whatever time it is, everybody. So I'm Ally Burleson-Gibson. I'm with the Census Bureau, as Sandy mentioned, and I love to talk about data. I get super nerdy over it, so watch out. If I start doing that, just be like, I'm counting on you, Little League. I saw that shirt over there, I think, and it got in my head. Give me that sign if I start going overboard and talking too much, okay? So, Sandy asked me to come down because I love to talk about numbers, specifically about how to help people figure out how they can use free data, got that? Free, this is all free, data from the government, basically to figure out who your market is and potentially who your competitors and complementary businesses are in your area. Okay, so when we're talking about customers, I'm sure everybody has a kind of idea of who they want to talk to, right? Like I heard someone on this side of the room talking about a home care business with elderly and veterans, right? So we might want to pull up data on people who are older and who happen to be veterans, just to get a sense of where they are and where you might want to market your business. Okay, we also heard from a kayaking, outdoor type business. I heard somebody talking about clothing, yes. Okay, so we've heard various things in the room, and even without knowing very much, I know already there's probably a couple of different launch points we could take. We could either start looking at customers, or we could start looking at business types just to see what's out there. Now, I know this is only the second session for this challenge, right? Yeah. And it sounds like some of you are already in business, maybe others are not quite there yet. So let's not get too overwhelming, but let's take a quick show of hands. How many people know what a NAICS code is? NAICS code? Anybody? One person? You want to tell us what this is?
I was thinking what it means. It's a North American something. I put it on my OSHA logs. NACIS.
Yes, that sounds right. OSHA.
But I don't know what it means. I just.
Good. Well, you've heard of it, so that's a start. All right. So the NAICS code, North American Industry Classification.
That's it.
Yes. Right. So that's a code that you can look at data on different industries by using. Okay. And if you are incorporating and you're working with somebody like the Small Business Administration, say, or maybe you're working with SWAM, the Small Woman Minority-Owned organization from the state, right? If you're working with one of these two places, they're probably going to ask you to put a NAICS code on some form. If you're not working with those, you might see it pop up somewhere else, but you might not ever need to know this. If you want to look at data about business in your area, you definitely need it though, okay? So, what we're going to do is this. We're going to look at census.gov. We're here right now, okay? And I am going to hope that the site is going to work beautifully without problem. There were a few issues earlier, but we're going to get to it, okay? So what we're going to do is top right. You're gonna have topics, geography, library, data, surveys, program, newsroom, about us, more. All right, so you can see what's there. When you click on topics, you will notice that business is one of them. Everyone see that? Okay, and you have a few options there. When you click on business, you can either go to latest information or you can choose one of the different things that's listed here. So, if you now know what a NAICS code is and have no idea what your NAICS code is, you might want to start with that classification code piece, okay? So when we're doing that, we'll take a look at a search, all right? And so if we have, again, I heard clothing, outdoor, home care, what other types of businesses are in the room? Who else is here?
Fitness.
Fitness? Okay, I'm gonna use that one. All right, so if I type in fitness, and then do the search, I'm gonna get a variety of different topics that pop up, right? So we're talking fitness equipment and supply merchant wholesalers, physical fitness evaluation services, sports club facilities, physical fitness, spas without accommodations, and so on. So you can see that there are a bunch of different codes and or definitions for them. So does any one of these look like it describes your business?
Probably physical fitness studio.
Okay.
Would be one that would.
Physical fitness studios, all right. So this one's 713940. Yes?
Sure.
All right, so I'm gonna click on that. And what you'll notice is that there are actually several listed under that same code that probably look similarly. And maybe you can't see that very well, so give me a second. Is that easier for everybody?
Oh, yeah.
Much better? All right, good. Let me not overdo it, okay. All right, so we're gonna click on physical fitness studios, right? So when I do that, it's gonna give you a very detailed definition, sometimes very detailed, in this case not too much. But it's gonna give you a definition of exactly what is meant by this code, give you some examples, and it'll also give you some cross-reference information. So you can see there what this industry is made up of. Maybe I need to do it again. Let's see. All right, so if we're looking at establishments primarily engaged in operating fitness and recreational sports facilities featuring exercise and other active physical fitness conditioning or recreational sports activities, does that sound like it's in line with what you do? Yes? Cool, then that's gonna be your code. Tell me your name.
Paul.
All right, Paul, that's your code.
So what if you have a facility that has like that and also retail?
So you have like a store or you're
Sure.
selling stuff out of the,
Yeah.
so basically, you link your code to whatever is your main moneymaker. So if you're a fitness facility and you've got like a tiny store that has drinks or, you know, whatever, certainly you could look at that too, just out of curiosity's sake, do the research piece and see what's around, but probably you wanna stick with what your main moneymaker is. Does that make sense? So if you have a business that has multiple different things, right, like I heard some sort of art thing happening over here, and then I heard the word therapeutic come up, so what if she's like a social worker and an artist at once? I don't know if that's the case, I'm just dreaming this up. So anytime you, okay, yeah, recreational therapy, I'm just saying. So if you wanna do multiple things in your business, right, it doesn't really matter which code you wanna search with. All we're trying to do is get an idea of what's around, again, who our competitors are, maybe some of the other businesses that you might want to partner or work with, depending on what you do, okay? So we've got Paul's business here, right? So we're going to use this code, 713940. Just remember that for a second. If you're not already great with numbers, write it down, because I'll probably forget in like 2 seconds, okay? All right, and so once we've got that, we're going to go back, and we can either go to the business and industry page right here, or we can go all the way to the back and look at those topics again and go to business. Okay, so basically all we're trying to do with this is figure out where the information is and what we can get in terms of looking at what's going on in our communities. So when we do this, we're gonna go to latest information, okay, after we have our code, and it's kind of a big button up there so you don't miss it. And when we have that open, to the right of the page, we see get business data. Does everybody see that? Yes? Okay. And I probably should have said this initially. You have slides that we've passed around. I don't do a slideshow presentation, but these are sort of meant for your reference later. They'll have the links, they'll have the URLs. I think I use the QR codes on there. So if you need them, you can get to these tools without having to remember the steps and the whole thing. So this is really me just showing you what you can potentially do, okay? So when we're looking at the industry stats portal, we already did the search, and we know we are looking at, 713940.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Does that sound? Yes. All right, so you see the first thing that comes up, fitness and recreational sports centers, right? And you can see then aerobic dance and beyond that, athletic clubs and then bodybuilding and so on. But what you'll notice is that the code's the same. So it really doesn't matter which one of these you click on, as long as you're using the same code that we had initially searched, right? So when we have this thing open, there's several possible places to get data. All right, and you can see 4 of them listed right here in the table. County business patterns is an excellent one, especially in Virginia because we get both county and city data, being a commonwealth. Survey of business owners is also an excellent source of information. Let me see, show of hands, how many veterans in the room? Anybody? Couple, okay. So why might you care if there are veteran business owners in your community? Go ahead.
About veteran business owners? Maybe get a discount or extra help or something?
The extra help piece maybe. Can you talk about that, Sandy? Can you mention why it might be good to know if you were a veteran business owner, sort of how you stack up into the context of being a veteran business owner in your community?
Well, I mean, I think that from a community support, if I'm going out to purchase something, that to me is going to give me a little extra plus. That I mean, I would rather go support him than someone that's just an average business. I mean, it's just part of it.
Right. And additionally, with the SBA, the Small Business Administration, there are certain programs for veteran-owned small businesses, right? So I started to mention business ownership. And when we're talking about women, minorities, veterans, and a couple of other very specific groupings, you may have additional opportunities available to you based on how you've incorporated who the owner is and so on. So that might just be something to be aware of. So when you look at the survey of business owners information, it might not be kind of an automatic like, hey, let me check that out. But if you know that you might fit into one of those categories and can potentially benefit from knowing how you fit into that context, you probably do want to check it out, okay? So county business patterns and survey of business owners are the big 2 that I always recommend. Of course, you can look at any of those other data pieces in the table there. And there's another little gem at the bottom of this page, but you have to keep scrolling way, way down. And it says selected visualizations. The map isn't showing up too great, but I don't think this name really does this thing justice. So you click on this map. And evidently it will load slowly. And so what we're going to find here is actually an industry snapshot. So again, some of you are already in business, some are just starting out. How many startups? Okay, Sophia. Good. When you are looking at some of the hypotheticals that you have to provide in a business plan, does that come to you right off the top of your head? Do you know what your industry looks like over the last several years? Good, you have data for it. Awesome. Come do this presentation. Perfect, right? So you don't always know these things, though. Sometimes it's like you've got to dream up some stuff, and that's good, right? Business owners, creative, you're in a startup role, you've got some ideas, you want to put it all together. Sometimes it's not as easy as it sounds, though. So with this industry snapshot, when we're looking at the information, we can do so either at the U.S. level, which is what our default is, or we can go to our state level. Okay? Either way, we're going to get the same type of information. It's all still going to be related to the fitness and recreational sports centers because that's the code we had initially selected, right? So after you've figured out where you want to be and what you want to be looking at, it's pretty easy just to keep going down that route, okay? So when we are looking at the state of Virginia, And we can see things like receipts and revenue per capita, or the number of establishments, I think that's a good one. Can change up the map to get a better view of that. So it looks like right now, just in terms of looking at the southeast, until we have the whole state of Virginia broken down by county, that there is a lot of receipts and revenue per capita in the states to the southeast of the US, right? But when we're looking at Virginia, it might tell a different story. So what do we find here? First of all, the map is pretty light, so I don't know how well you guys in the back can see it. You okay? So when you start to zoom in, we'll notice that we see a lot going on in the Richmond area, a lot of these businesses in Northern Virginia, and a lot in Virginia Beach, and maybe a couple of the neighboring areas down there. How many do we see in Southwest Virginia?
It's just data not available.
Right, right. So for at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, several counties, right, data is not available. And usually what that means is that there are not enough to support the data, because when you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see that there's quite a bit of detail. So one of the frustration pieces can be if you see a map like this and it doesn't feel like it's really giving you what you need for your particular community. If there are not a lot of businesses that are of your particular type, you won't always have data accessible. But I want to talk about why for a second, because it's not just that the Census Bureau is trying to annoy you, I promise. It is annoying sometimes. The reason for it is confidentiality, right? So if I'm a business owner and I've got a gym, Paul's going to be my competition. And Paul can easily come on to this map, pull data for the county where he already knows my business is. He knows I have 3 employees, and suddenly he's able to pull from the data that we have. If that data is published and I'm the only business in the area of this type, I suddenly know, or I should say Paul knows about my business, how much I'm paying my employees, how many employees I have, how many receipts I'm bringing in, and so on. So do we understand why that's not available? Because I think that's kind of a central piece. Again, it's not just to be annoying, I swear.
You might block the information until there's a certain threshold of businesses in that county before they start publishing?
Yes, in fact, that NAICS code search that we started with, you can search starting with 2-digit NAICS codes, 3-digit, 4-digit, 5-digit, 6-digit. 6-digit is as specific as you can get. 2, 3, 4 digits are going to back that up for you a little bit, so you could either do it that way, or you could stick with state data as opposed to going down to the county level. So you have a couple of different ways that you can sort of maneuver around that. So again, looking at the map, it doesn't give us a lot of detail, but if you want to talk about how your business fits into the context of what's going on statewide, you're going to have information back for the last 3 or 4 most recent economic censuses, and that's also going to give you change information between the last 2. Right, so who even knew there was an economic census? Anybody? 1 also? 2, okay. I had no idea until I started working at the Census Bureau. It's not something you hear a lot. It happens every 5 years though, and so you get this update of information. All right, and so what you can see then is the number of establishments, how many businesses like yours, receipts and revenue, annual payroll, total employment, payroll per employee, and so on. So there's lots and lots of information related to industry, and then you can see charts, graphs, and so on related to the industry that you've selected.
Ally, could Paul use the continuous counties that have industries located and get that information as well to get an idea of, I mean, we're a very mobile
society.
Yeah, society here. I mean, it doesn't matter. We don't look at the lines.
Yes, definitely. You can't necessarily see it on this particular piece with the industry snapshot, but you can actually look at county business patterns, and we can do that. That was one of the things that was listed in that table initially. When you are taking a look at county by county data or county by city data, you can see how many businesses are at the very least, and typically what size they are, so how many employees they have. So you know if you're starting out as a small business, how you sort of fit into that mix, okay? So we're just gonna look at.
You mentioned every 5 years for
Yes.
the economic data.
Yes.
So, but that's the
data, I guess, is more recent though, right?
The census.
The census data.
Right, correct. So the big census happens every 10 years. The American Community Survey happens every month of every year with data published every fall and winter. Yes, so people-related data is updated every year.
Okay.
All right, so here we are looking at the county business patterns. Okay, so we're in Washington County. I'm just gonna come down to Washington. Or maybe I'm gonna overshoot it. There we go.
Go on down.
All right, so we have Washington County, and it looks like the most recent year for the county business patterns is gonna be 2013 in this case. Once you've selected that, then you have to still look for that NAICS code again, and what you can see then is that as we scroll down this list, we have things starting with 7.1, and someone brought up this question and kind of raised a nice point, right? Could you back up your search to get more information? So in this case, things starting with 7.1 are going to be arts, entertainment, and recreation. Of course, we know that you want to be much more specific if you're looking at opening a fitness center, right? So we can click for detail. And then, again, you just keep scrolling down until you find the appropriate code for what you're looking for, right? So 713940. Okay, and we're going to compare. And when we click compare, not only are we going to see Washington County, but we're going to see every county and city in the state that have one of these businesses. All right, and just sort of a quick read on this page right here. I don't know why exactly total establishments falls in the middle, but this is sort of your first line of looking at the information, right? Total establishments, middle of the page is going to tell you how many of this business type are in each given county. To the left, you'll see some of the employee and payroll information, and to the right, you see the number of establishments broken down by employment class size, meaning how many people these businesses employ, all right? So is everyone with me on this so far? Yes? All right, so obviously I know Accomack County is nowhere near where we are right now. So as we're scrolling down, we can see like Botetourt County, for example, has 3. I said it right too. Everyone, can I just get, no, I'm just kidding. I screwed that up terribly last time I came to this area. Let's see, Buchanan County has 2. Okay, and you can, again, you can see sort of the breakdown. Now, with these codes to the left, and I'll just use Botetourt as an example, because there are only 3 of these businesses, when you look at some of the other data pieces related, particularly around payroll, because people are sensitive about income, they don't necessarily want to know what they're being paid. You'll see a little bit of coding when you hover over those. You'll be told exactly what that means for those, okay? So, Buchanan, Carroll has 1. What else? Tell me if there's something that you see that I'm going over. I'm obviously going fast. All right, so Wise County has 2, it looks like. Wythe County has 2. Bristol has 2. Okay, Lex has 1. All right, eventually we're gonna pass Washington County. That's definitely what I've done. Give me a second.
it's pretty good place.
We had 2, okay, good. All right, so anyways, you get the idea then. You can see based on a few clicks how to access information related to the counties and cities in your community, looking at the same type of business that you might have. So what does that tell you? It tells you who your direct competition is for one thing. It also tells you how big are these guys? Because you know when you're a startup, or perhaps you're already in business but you're still small, you have a little bit different thing happening than for a business that's been around for 20 or 30 years, right? Your marketing costs are going to be high initially. I'm starting to get into territory that is not in my realm, so don't let me do that. But nonetheless, you're going to be a little bit different than what the industry average might be. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that while you're comparing geographically what's going on in your community, it's sometimes a good idea to go back to that report that we were looking at. And not because I want you to have to go through all these statistics again, but on the top of the industry snapshots page, there's a compare your business. Can everyone see that? All right, so that's going to allow you to plug in a couple of those hypothetical things, right, that we don't always know about until we're really up and running. your business to the industry average. Okay, so we're still looking at the fitness, recreational, sports centers, all right? So enter your annual revenue amount in whole dollars. I have no idea what a good number would be, so throw something out there. $1 million? Okay.
Dream big.
I mean, that's typically what I bring in.
Does that I didn't want to be super specific since you already had to volunteer.
I want to trade my kayak business for your business.
Okay, enter your annual payroll in whole dollars. I'm sure you're paying your people quite well, so, you know, maybe you're paying out like $750. How many employees do you have?
One.
That's where I'm gonna be looking. All right, and you have one establishment, right? So we're just gonna go with that and calculate our.
Yes, works both places.
Right.
All right, so once we've done that and we calculate our ratios, we can scroll down. And here's what we're gonna see. Now, before we get like super excited about the numbers, a couple of things to note. Those first two lines are in thousands, right? So if our business is bringing in $1 million, note that the ones beside us are in thousands of dollars. So while it looks like this fitness business is over the top, and it is doing quite well compared to industry average, relative to the industry average in 2012, it's making a little more, but you're not like, you know, doubling what the average was doing. And then you can see back to 2007 as well. Now, in terms of your receipt/revenue per employee, your employees are killing it. So, even though you're already paying the one person $750K a year, you might even consider a raise for them based on how well they're doing. Right. Of course, all jokes aside, you can see how your business falls in line with the average from the most recent economic censuses from 2012 and 2007. Again, just to get that sense of how you compare, how you stack up, what's going on in your particular business compared to industry average across the entirety of the U.S. And we know that this is not going to account for things like geographic variabilities and a variety of other factors, but it gives you a sense of where you sit, how you fit the dynamic, what is the context of my business compared to the rest of the world. Does that make sense? Are there questions on this so far? Have I overwhelmed anybody yet? Yes? Yeah, you're overwhelmed. All right, so you need to be elbowing Little League guy next to you, like, where's that timeout, right? Okay. So the Census Bureau, collects tons and tons of demographic information, which means people-related data, household-related data, right? And everyone sort of knows that about us. I'm not going to bore us with all that detail. That is a great way for you to get information on your customers. It's a super way, again, to grab free information, right? We collectively pay for the data, we collectively provide the data to the Census Bureau. So it's time for you to use it, right? So when you are looking through some of the slides that have been provided, I suggest using a couple of different tools for looking at some of that other information. If you, at any point, have questions related to this information we've talked about, or to things that you might start to explore on your own, my contact information is in those slides. I will also give you a card if you need that. I didn't really start with my typical introduction, but so I do trainings, I do presentations, webinars, one-on-one assistance. If you have a question, you call me or email me, and that's all sort of part of my job, so that's what I'm available to do. Okay? Questions at this point, so as not to get further overwhelmed and not too late in the evening.
I'll throw a general question out.
Yes.
If you were curious about, say, fast food industry, and you were going to start a business comparable to that,
right,
and you wanted to look at the metrics, the numbers of that business, like, for example, what they spend on advertising, what they spend on this and that and so forth, can you see those kinds of numbers?
Can you see their specific expenditures? No. In fact, I just had that question in, I think, Charlottesville in the last couple of weeks. I believe that there used to have been an IRS, I want to say it was IRS, an IRS-related tool, right? Because it was based on what people were reporting into the IRS, probably through their taxes, right? I don't know how that information is now accessible, though. But exactly that question came up. Is there a tool for that? Yes, there probably is. It might be for pay somewhere. I am not familiar with that, but it's something that if I come across, I can share with Sandy so that she can in turn share it with you guys.
I think some trade publications too, and manufacturers of equipment offer some of that. For example, I worked with a lady that wanted to set up a laundromat 2 or 3 years ago, and it was amazing how much of the data that you need to set up a laundromat that they provide to you as to, okay, this is the population density that you need to be able to start that up, and this is what your average operating. It walks you through that, because what they want to do is help people to set up a laundromat, because you're going to be buying my equipment to go into that. So you have to do your homework.
Right, and that's sort of why I'm here, right? To introduce some of the information that you could potentially use, and to obviously recommend that you use it, right? I mean, clearly, I'm going to need to do that. But you know, I think it's, from a personal perspective, my background is in strategic planning, a lot of nonprofit management, and when looking at data, right, we're able to make a lot of really well-informed decisions. Sometimes we know things intuitively about our communities, and we know, hey, this is the spot that I want for my business. But when we go to funders, or perhaps when we are applying for this project, this contest with Sandy, we have to be able to support that with some information that is available to all of us, so that we have it comparatively, and we know that, you know, if Lindsay says, hey, here's what I found, and then Sandy goes and tries to find that same information, she should be able to find that and make sense out of it. So, again, if you have questions as you're looking through any of the information that I've provided, please feel free to contact me to help you through that. I will be here all day tomorrow. I think I have 2 spots still available first thing in the morning, 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock, if you are interested in a one-on-one session. Do drink a lot of coffee beforehand, because we'll have some people bring. So, yeah.
You know, there's the typical stuff too, like population density for the location you're going to be, and not only the census, but if you're looking for, you know, you're on Main Street, you know, the VDOT has traffic information that shows you how many cars go past that. So that's all important to you as you develop your business plan. That's why I wanted to bring Ally here, so that you can learn about these resources, because that's important. You're building a case for your business. You know, will this float? And that's what your business plan, and then when you do your pitch to those judges, you've got to point out that you've done your research, that yes, there's this many cars that are located in such and such, and you know, we know that they have to be, because you're from the, see, I'm pretty good at that. So you got to know, okay, what's the average time a year? I mean, how many times a year does that car have to be serviced? Average. You know, you need to have that kind of information, because the whole thing you're trying to show is there's a need, and I can generate this much revenue. I know there's a market out there, and I can generate this much revenue to make it happen. Any other questions for Ally?
Where are you based? You based in Richmond, or?
I am, yes, but I travel around the state.
In a car?
I'm mostly based in my
traveling.
car. I happen to live here.
So your 8 o'clock tomorrow is here?
It is here.
It's actually back in my office. I have a
I'm
conference
sorry,
room at the end of the hall.
Well, I'll take that if no one else is gonna join you. I'll make coffee. So.
All right, sounds good. 8 o'clock. Anyone else want to come? 9 a.m.? All right.
You could actually have a couple people in there and let, you know, if you want them to just know how to manipulate the data.
Yeah.
You're gonna bring up data on the personal business that you're working on and help, or just train how to use it?
It's,
Depends on your question again.
yeah, it sort of depends on what you want or need. So what type of business are you opening, Eric?
It's barbershop expansion.
So what I'm probably gonna do then is help you look at something like this, if you want to look at other barbershops in the area, but probably more than that would be looking at who are your target market. So barbershops generally men, right, you might look at a certain age group. You can probably also look at things like income and poverty in the area, because businesses tend to do better when people can pay for, you know, services, products, and so on. So it's, do I do that? Okay, good. What time will I be here? Well, it sounds to me like I'm gonna be here from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. tomorrow. The only thing I have open is 8 and 9 at this point. But, you know, again, if you guys find that you think this would be helpful and you can't make it tomorrow, we can do like an hour-long webinar, depending on
so much.
I will make a little plug for tomorrow's New Knowledge. Here in this room, we're gonna have, a session on QuickBooks Online. It's actually, a gentleman that works with, across the street with Mr. Spiegler, so, you wanna bring your bag lunch at noon tomorrow from noon to about 1:30.
What's his lunch? Do you offer any of these extra, seminars or classes that you're teaching for people who work regular hours?
What we're doing is we're actually live streaming those.
And it works.
What I do is I upload the video to YouTube. You can go to YouTube and
any time.
you can just Google or search on YouTube, New Knowledge. New Knowledge. And you can find everything. I think we've got about 39 to 40 sessions that we've been doing. We're the only group in Virginia that's doing anything like this for small business.
That's on the Chamber of Commerce website, or you just go to YouTube?
Go to YouTube, because that's where I'm
New Knowledge.
and just search New Knowledge. You can actually then,
We got a class tomorrow, right?
yes, but you can also then subscribe to the New Knowledge channel, and then you'll be notified when we upload a new video. Great. Thank you. Same time next week. Once you just, I'll leave your name things and we'll put them out for next week. Yeah, just leave them, just leave them.
You wanna come at 9, okay, and you're gonna come at 8?
How cool.